So this week I've been very fortunate to be able to work with one of my buyers looking to find them a very unique acreage property here in northern Colorado. And it really brought up and reminded me that how much uniqueness comes into buying an acreage, especially if it's going to be your forever home. And so today I really want to go through my 5 pro tips for searching for acreages out here in northern Colorado. And it will make your trip and your experience 10 times easier if you start thinking about these things early on. So let's jump into it today and see if it's worth buying an acreage here in northern Colorado. And as always, my name is Connor Martin. I work here with Sukup Real Estate Services in Fort Collins, Colorado. We love helping our buyers find the exact right spot they want to be when moving to northern Colorado. And I know with acreages, it is very unique, and so it takes a little extra time. So we are here to give that time. We are here to give those expertise to find that right spot. And if you're ever in need for someone to give you a little extra hand, or, even just answer a basic question, we are here for that. We are always happy and willing to help someone out when they're moving from out of state. So let's jump into it today and see if it is worth moving to northern Colorado when buying an acreage. So my first, big pro tip, and I think everybody knows this, but in Colorado, northern Colorado especially, this is very important, is Google Maps is a total liar. And location is very important, especially for most people who are thinking about buying an acreage. Now, we have a lot of options here. If you're thinking about being in close to Fort Collins or close to Loveland or close to some of these bigger cities in northern Colorado, well, we only really have a couple options to where you can really go for acreages. The typical one is going to be out north of Fort Collins or out east of Fort Collins or heading up into the foothills and mountains west of Fort Collins. And each one has its uniqueness to it. But the number one thing I would say is that, and the reason why I say that Google Maps is a liar, is that once you start getting into those county roads, especially the dirt roads, be prepared for the drive to be a little bit slower than the actual speed limit. Our roads are well taken care of, but as water happens, erosion happens, our roads tend to get washed out a little bit. They tend to get some potholes in it. So being able to make that drive in a decent amount of time is very important. And so when you see, especially online, you're looking on the MLS or Zillow, make sure you're looking at the description and seeing if it says 4x4 vehicle needed, or hey, this is a dirt road 5 miles off of Highway 85 east of Fort Collins. That's going to give you guys a pretty good idea of how long it's going to take. So like this week I was out at Pawnee Buttes grassland, and there were some homes out there that I went out and kind of took a look at, and it said it was going to be about an hour drive. Well, it probably took me about an hour 25 once I actually got to the road, because once I got to that road, it was so washed out that it felt like I was in a massage chair for an extra 25 minutes more than I should have been. And typically, going out to northern Colorado, especially if you're trying to be close to town, like I have a lot of clients, they'll be like, well, I want an acreage, but I want to be close to town. Well, if that's going to happen, you're going to have 2 options. One is they're going to be multi-million-dollar properties, is typically what I've seen. And if they aren't million-dollar properties, more likely they're going to be closer to that $700,000 to $900,000 range. And you're typically going to get a modular home that's going to be built on the property, which a lot of them can be nice, but a lot of people tend to stray away from those. And so when you start looking up in northern Colorado for an actual property, just kind of start feeling out what it looks like. If you head out east or north, you're going to run into multi-million-dollar homes, or you're going to run into more modular homes. And actually, as you go west up into the foothills and the mountains, you can actually find some really cool acreage properties for a pretty good price, but also knowing that a lot of those actually will have some really nicely maintained paved roads up to them. But once you make it up to that neighborhood, then it becomes a challenge of having a 4x4 vehicle to actually make it up the hills or up the mountains to make it actually to your property. And due to this winter this year, I will tell you, having an acreage up in the mountains probably was a little bit more of a challenge than this year than it has been in years past, just for the fact of having ice and snow covering the very, hilly and very shaded areas of the foothills of northern Colorado. So just something to be aware of on that side. So pro tip number 2 and number 3 on my list is definitely going to be, and they kind of match up together, is going to be a septic system, a propane tank, and what type of water source are you going to have. So here in northern Colorado, electricity is pulled pretty much everywhere, but gas lines are not. And so you want to be prepared on what you know utility-wise you're going to have, and also what type of water and sewage system you're in. And so if you're really close to town, or if you're in those acreage neighborhoods that are about 2 acres to 3 acre lots, a lot of times those are going to be on maybe city water, or they might have a community well or something on that end. With most properties, at least acreage wise, most of them don't have sewers run out to them. So having a septic tank is a big deal. And so when looking at a septic tank, make sure you know what capacity it is. Understand what that capacity means, especially for how many bedrooms you're going to have there and how many people are actually going to be living in that house. Because one of the worst things that could possibly happen is having to go in after purchasing a home and having to rebuild your septic system because you have too many people living at your house, or that septic system was not built to code for how many bedrooms are in that house. In terms of water supply, you're going to run into like community wells, you're going to run into city water, or you're going to run into your own well. If you run into wells, if you're a VA, FHA, or even conventional, it is 100% worth getting a water test done. It is definitely worth getting a septic test re-permit done for it as well. And so just do your due diligence when buying these kind of places, because some of these homes have been here for 70 years. And if you're buying a well that's almost empty and you're going to have to go drill another well for $60,000 because you got to go down 400 feet to water, that's going to be a bad day, and I would definitely not recommend it. And I have run into properties out here where wells have been some type of an issue. The last deal is definitely going to be, what type of gas are you going to have? Now, I know everybody wants to have natural gas. That would be the dream for everybody on an acreage property, but up here in northern Colorado, it is very unlikely, especially as you go more north of Fort Collins or east of Fort Collins. I have seen some stuff up in the foothills that do have gas that have been run to them, but it is pretty rare. So propane is going to be one of your biggest attributes. So pretty much all the acreages out here, you're going to see 500 to 1,000 gallon, propane tanks or gas tanks that are going to be sitting outside of the house. And know how much that's going to cost to fill, how quickly it runs out, because I'll tell you, it's very expensive if you're running a central HVAC or AC unit. It will suck that gas down like no tomorrow, and that's where it gets expensive. So think about, if you are buying an acreage, or if you already have potentially, think about pellet stoves. Look those up. They're really great for heating your house in the wintertime. And then maybe just open your house up during the summertime to get some of the cool air in, but that one is one of the hard ones that's inevitable to kind of deal with. So just be ready for that cost on that side. So my 4th pro tip for buying an acreage here in northern Colorado is definitely going to be getting a soils report, if it's worth it to you. And the reason why I say that is, if you go around here to northern Colorado, you'll notice that a lot of people don't have trees on their properties, especially when you start going out to some of those acreages. And a lot of reasons why is because of the environment and the soils. A lot of times our soils out here are a little bit more sandy. We're a more arid area out here. So being able to actually have a landscape and being able to water it and provide the nutrients that it really needs and have the right environment, being in northern Colorado can be a challenge. I just sadly dealt this week with a acreage that's actually in Fort Collins, right off of Taft Hill. It's got about 300 pine trees and an assortment of other trees and bushes. We ended up this year cutting down about 30 trees. And that was due to drought and stress issues, because even though we were watering them every day, it still wasn't enough after these trees have been established there for 40 years. They were starting to die. We ended up getting bugs, and then we ended up having to cut them down, which ended up being a very big expense. And also kind of leaves a little hole in your heart, because it's really sad when you spend that much money and time and effort on those plants to have them just wither away just because of the environment or the soils. And so definitely, if you're looking to buy a property out here, just maybe think about getting the soils tested, unless you're just looking to have a nice big acreage with very minimal plants or trees around. So my last pro tip, number 5, is definitely going to be make sure you know what type of internet you're getting when moving to northern Colorado. Now, I know my parents moved out to their place. They have a little acreage just to the south of Greeley, Colorado. They have a little 2-acre lot that I purchased for them a couple of years ago. I think it was back in 2018, 2019. And, you know, it was a big deal for them. They always wanted to move back out to an acreage ever since I was a little kid living in Parker. We had a 5-acre lot out there. And so they eventually were able to find a place out in Platteville, Colorado. Now, one of the things I did warn them about was going to be the internet, and that internet out there is pretty scarce. The nice part is they're about to get actually good internet out there through fiber optics, and so that's really sweet on that side. But they've lived out there now for 3 years with some of the worst internet I've ever seen. And it is actually one of the best satellite internet groups that I've come across, other than like say Starlink is. And so they're only getting like 35 to 40 megabytes per second of download speeds on their computers. And so sometimes it takes a week and a half for them to even get, you know, a page loaded up for like their US bank site. And so something to keep your mind on. A lot of places, especially acreage wise, they're just not going to have the same internet you're going to want. And so really look at the satellite groups. And if satellite isn't going to work, one of the other ones that I've been hearing a lot of people moving to, especially like out towards Wellington, Colorado, is actually going to like your Verizon store or AT&T store and getting like a hotspot, or even like Verizon now has internet access for like acreage properties. So something well worth looking at on that side. So those are my 5 pro tips for looking for an acreage. I could talk for hours about it. I can give so many details about what you need to look out for, especially when buying a house here in northern Colorado that is going to be on an acreage. Or if you're going to even go one step further and buy a vacant lot, there's even 10 times more to look out for. So feel free to reach out with me to any questions, especially if you're looking to buy here in the next couple of years, because starting early is going to give you your best opportunity to make the right choice, to where once you buy that property, you're going to be as happy as heck, and you're not going to be worried about some of these things that could potentially come up years down the road. I really hope you guys like these videos. If you guys could, always please subscribe, like, and share. And I really hope that next week we can start jumping into some of these funner areas that might have some of these acreages in it, like Livermore, Colorado. We could go out towards Pawnee Buttes grasslands, and maybe even head out south a little bit more towards the Denver area, because acreages are just harder and harder to find each year. And so finding that right location is going to be very important. Have a great week, guys. See you next week.